you. Okay, I am next on the speaker's queue, and so I would like to start with, and because I want to get some clear answers to some questions that I have. So you mentioned earlier today that $70 million was invested in inclusive economic development and community programs and
Give
that
or
sort
take.
of thing.
Yes.
Give or take. Okay, and we'll take 70. How much of that was Measure U?
About 30, about 35. It's about half and half.
Okay, so $35 million.
About half and half.
Okay, and then how much of the entire city of Sacramento budget goes to the police department?
I think it was 170 something.
It's $170 million, and that's what percentage of our budget?
So if I may, I don't know. I'm happy to do this line of inquiry, but I would like to please make a point.
Okay.
Which is that when we did Measure U, I promised this as much of the second half cent as possible. I did not promise to reform the entire police budget.
Okay.
And this is the Measure U committee.
Okay, so and then can CARES Act money go to existing city services? Can the CARES Act money go to existing city services? Like
existing city services.
Or existing city services.
Only to the limited extent that it can be used to reimburse any city service costs responding directly to COVID. But again, my whole advocacy has been to get as far away from that as possible and to use this.
Sure. I'm just trying to get some clear answers here.
Yes.
And then what fund do the lawsuits that we pay out for the police department come from? Because by my estimation, it's $3 million in the last 12 months, $2.4 million to the Clark family, and $550,000 to the protesters from East Sacramento. And I don't see that reflected anywhere in the budget. So I'm trying to figure out what line item does that come out?
I need to get back to you on exactly what line item, but it's risk management, which is the general fund.
Gotcha. Okay. So out of the general fund, we're paying $3 million in bad behavior payments at least. But we are also then going to take Measure U money and spend the majority of it on the police.
No, the first half. That's not fair because I'm sorry.
I gotta take my mask off.
That's the first half, not the second half.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to use this time now to lay out what seemed to be like a series of
if you want to ask me questions, I'm happy to say.
I did. I asked those questions. I got them. Okay. But what I'm saying is, you started this out saying that you joined you ran for city council, you ran for mayor because you wanted to make sure that we were investing in the communities that were important. And what I'm trying to figure out is, have we changed our police spending since you've been mayor? Because systems are perfectly designed to get the outcomes that they get. And the outcomes that we're having right now are 300 people spent time writing to you telling you no. If you were to poll your community, you would hear a lot of people right now saying, I don't want to be personally working for the state, getting a pay cut, while the police who have had to pay bad behavior payments are getting a raise. Like, part of the conversation that's disingenuous right now is that the police negotiated a pay raise that we are committing to pay, and we have not brought them back to the bargaining table, even though we are in an emergency, a state of emergency. That can't be understated. No, I gave you your time. Please give me mine to address you on this. Because that can't be understated, Mr. Mayor. It just simply can't. Like, we are in, you're here as talking as if you're not part of the machine. Like, it's not like, gosh, I hope it could change. You are the person who can make it change. There are one of 9 people who sit on this dais, and all 9 of you are supposedly Democrats. And I'm trying to understand why we're fighting about how we're spending this money right now. Like, half of the, like you said, and words matter to me, you said we don't have Measure U money, but we do. We have $80 million scheduled to come in and Measure U money. And based on the campaign promises, $40 million, at least of that money should be going. And if we were to go back and look, if only 30 or 35 million of that 70 was spent out of Measure U, that means you owed us $75 million out of the pot if it's 1.5 years, because that's what was promised to the voters. So to say, oh, most of it, to say, well, we negotiated immediately 80% out of the 100, it's like a series of compromises. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And it doesn't fly. Like, honestly, it doesn't fly. And the reason I asked you about the CARES Act money is because the reason we're not paying for police out of that is because you can't use it to infill police services specifically. So now we're going to try to make that the community reinvestment money, and that doesn't make sense, especially because a city has an obligation to do community investment. You are not a municipal military force. We're not. And so that's how we spend our money. Right? We're spending it like we're a municipal military force. And now I'm supposed to be impressed because we spent $70 million over the course of a year. The city budget is huge. $70 million is sad. The fact that we can take libraries and we can take parks and they barely show up when we put the whole pie chart of the city should make us sad. And so what I'm asking is, I'm not saying any of the things that you've done are trying to do to push progress are bad. I'm saying they're uninspired. I'm saying I want you to go home tonight, close your eyes, and imagine a world where we could actually do something different. Because it also doesn't feel right to me that you've stood here and talked about kids, but people in this community wanted to make sure there was money set aside for kids. And they put a measure on the ballot to be able to do that. And you along with the firefighters unit and the police union and the guy who was supposed to own Major League Soccer funded the opposition against it. And it was 2.5% of the budget, so that when we had an economic downturn like this, you wouldn't have to stand before us and say, I'm sorry, all the money's gone. We'd know at least 2.5%, no matter how big or small that was going to go for kids. When we're actively arguing against giving money to kids so that we can buy a Bearcat, which is a militarized vehicle in the city of Sacramento, we have lost our way. Like, you wanted to stand up and say, call in National Guard and say, stop the protests. But I think we're Rome, and I think Rome is falling because this can't sustain for forever. Like somebody said online, and I think it's true, you should be happy that all people are asking for is equity and not revenge, because the revenge would be bloody and it would be terrible. Like all people are asking for is that we do right with this money. And I'm sorry, it's personal to me. And I said I wasn't going to be super yelly today, but it's personal to me because this money matters. This is people's real lives at stake. And if you care as much as you sit up on this dais and tell us you care, I need you to go back to the drawing board and do better than $5 million over 2 years, and do better than telling us that we can't afford participatory budgeting, and do better than a budget that you sit before us that's 41.7 out of $80 million going to the police. I'm asking that of you, that you do better than this, because this is not okay. And we have to call attention to it because it continues to persist, and the status quo will give us the exact same outcomes we've always gotten. I'm sorry that the people don't have a well-paid union that's contributing to people's campaigns and making stuff happen. I'm sorry that we didn't negotiate a contract where we got raises even when we cut up. I'm sorry about that, but that's the reality, and it's our job to protect against that. And what I see here is us rolling over and playing dead at a time when we should be standing up and fighting. So when you get on this dais tomorrow and have city council meeting, I need you to take my proposal and come up with something, a serious contender, because quite frankly, what I think you've given to us is complete, and it shouldn't even be considered. It's so ridiculous. Like, I am impressed with the restraint of everybody on this dais and on the call tonight, because we should be screaming and furious about this, because this is a travesty. And we can't dance around these numbers, Mr. Mayor. Like, that doesn't make sense. We have to get to the heart of it. How much were we spending on police and fire when you came into office, and how much are we spending now? And if it's not better, why are we here? Because now, in an economic downturn, we should be taking that money and getting us back to where we were. And instead, we're trying to use that money to do equity work. That's not what that money was designed for. It's not. It was designed to fill in the gaps of what we were losing that was important for our city. And I don't think what we were losing that's important shows up in violence. Like, we're going to fund violence at a time where people are dying in a pandemic? Please make it make sense.
I started my remarks this evening by agreeing with some of your fundamental premise that the system is stacked, that the system is stacked towards those interests and those traditional services within our city of Sacramento.
And this budget is stacked against those interests.
You going to allow me to?
Yes.
Please.
Go on.
I am, I think, a pretty strong mayor in a pretty diluted system of power that enables me, yes, to make real change, to try to change the culture of city government, to try to change the spending priorities. And that's exactly what I have endeavored to do. Now, can I do more? Of course I can. Am I done? Of course I am not. But if you look at, you ask me to go to sleep tonight and wake up tomorrow and sit in that seat and think about what you had to say, I will do that. But I would also remind you that I went to bed last night and woke up this morning and proposed the most fundamental redistribution of police resources that has actually been put forward by an elected official in this city. For I said that I intend to put into binding resolution a policy in the city of Sacramento that will forever shift police resources to a unit that will more effectively and compassionately respond to 911 calls involving people with mental illness, the homeless, and a whole host of other categories, where the police are the first and last resort for all those calls. All right? The people of this city reelected me back in March with almost 80% of the vote. And I appreciate your point of view, and I certainly appreciate your passion. We need you. But I'm happy to continue to have this conversation with you because I'm as much of an idealist as you are. I'm as much of a visionary as you are. Excuse me.
Then please get us a better budget.
Excuse me. Let me finish, please. I have a different job than you do. I take your challenge to do better. I take your challenge to do better. I will endeavor to do so. Thank you.